Hello, I thought I would record a quick video just to recap some of the key points regarding the assignment before it's due next Tuesday. This just to give you a bit of an additional support and a few things to worth mentioning that are cropping up in some of the questions that I'm receiving. So I hope this is beneficial. So firstly, just a kind of a recap of what you're required to do for the assignment. So in this situation, you're going to be working as a financial analyst for a major firm of accountants and advisors specializing in the sports sector. Now, your company has been approached by a wealthy overseas client who wants to buy a British football club. At this stage, the overseas client is relaxed about which club and is content to let you put forward suggestions. So with this, you can be kind of flexible as to which type of club you want to recommend and why. So I'm not going to put any kind of restrictions on the type of club or even the motives for buying the club. But just bear in mind that it needs to be based on sound financial management. So the first part of your case study report is to identify a prospective club for purchase and to provide a brief background on the club. So this could include some reference to the club's history, its sporting performance, and as appropriate, its broader social and/or political role. It also needs to be placed in its geographical and hence financial context. And this section should be fully referenced. We've made a point here of saying that this shouldn't be based on Wikipedia, but perhaps your own research into the club. Now, the types of things that I would be looking for in this section are things like the background to the club, the history of the club, but then also key things that you would want to know if you were buying a football club. So what would you actually be buying? Yes, of course, the team, but what else beyond that? What is the kind of the makeup of the club? What about the infrastructure? What about facilities? What are the other assets of the organization that are going to be worthwhile knowing about? Worth thinking about geographical context as well, because is this an area of the country which has got a lot of potential? Is there going to be a lot of growth? Is this perhaps an area that is up and coming? So thinking about transport links, travel links, just putting a bit of thought into why you're recommending the club you're recommending and giving a bit of background to that. Now, the second part is really important, and this is where you're going to get most of your points. So we're asking you to use off the pitch and the comparison tool and off the pitch, which we've been through in the classes together. And you're required to present appropriate but selective comparative financial analysis over the last few years. Now, what we mean by the last few years is sort of up to 5 years. So from 2024 back to 2018 or 19. Bearing in mind some of those years are going to be heavily influenced by COVID, but you've got to show a bit of understanding as to why numbers might be the way they are. I'd say we're not going to say you have to choose a certain amount of parameters or metrics to show in terms of financial analysis, but I would say it should really be at least three, and probably no more than 6 or 7. Okay. But again, I'm not going to say for definite what you have to do in terms of a hard and fast number. You need to choose a club where there's going to be adequate financial data. And by what we mean is it's got to be a big enough club that it has to publish its accounts for off the pitch to be able to have access to them, because that's where off the pitch get their data from, is the club's financial accounts themselves. We're asking you to avoid clubs which have recently been taken over. So thinking about Chelsea or Newcastle United, potentially Manchester United, because there's going to be a lot of information in the public domain about that takeover. And what we're asking you to do is your own analysis on the metrics and data that you're including here. This is still going to give you quite a lot of clubs in the UK to choose from. So as a leading financial analysis, a key element of your contribution will be the quality of your discussion of the financial performance and position of the target acquisition. So what we're looking for in this section of the report is your choice of parameters and how they support your arguments. So if you're choosing a club that's got a really low revenue, but it's actually maximizing all of its potential in terms of some of the other metrics, then it's not really going to make sense. What we're looking for is a kind of a reasoned rationale or a narrative and how the financial data proves that. So in theory, doing the financial analysis first and finding clubs that you think are performing well, or there's potential, or there's areas in which it could prove, which will provide value to the investor. Okay, so we're thinking about what's going to be providing value to the investor here as well. In terms of your analysis also, so yeah, choice of metrics is important. Obviously, it needs to tell us something, but your analysis of that data is also going to be important here. So don't just tell me what the numbers say. I can see the numbers. Hopefully you're going to include some of the charts, download the charts from Off the Pitch and include them in your report. So I'm going to be able to see the numbers. So I don't want you to kind of repeat that one club has a higher revenue than another club, because we'll hopefully be able to see that from the graphs and the data that you include in the report. What I would like to see is your analysis of that data and what that actually means in practice. So if a club has a low wages to turnover ratio, why is that important, and what does that tell us, and what can we read into the club based on some of these metrics? Okay, so going that bit further and using your analysis to go beyond describing and actually telling us what that means. So do you understand the metric that you're including? What does that metric mean, and what does that mean in practice in terms for an investor? Now, this third section is going to be really important as well. So the client is also a great believer in Einstein's mantra that not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. So what we mean here is that being analytical of that data. So bearing in mind that we're using data from Off the Pitch, and knowing that that data comes from the clubs themselves. So what are some of the weaknesses of the financial accounts that clubs produce? Okay, now what we're asking you to do is provide a brief critique on the usefulness of published financial statements for organizations like football clubs, and to identify other information which could be relevant to the investment decision. I need to highlight something here, which I made a mistake, and I've included it in this slide. I'm going to quickly change this whilst we're recording, and hope that this isn't going to be too much of a distraction. It's actually week 7 that we are looking for here. Okay, so not week 6, but week 7. Okay. So on week 7, there is recommended reading. So this section of the report needs to be a broad critique of financial documentation. So what are the key limitations of financial documents? Okay, and we've spoken about these in class, the fact that they're kind of historical documents, for example. Okay, but using the recommended reading from week 7 that's on the Canvas page of week 7. Okay. So don't neglect this section. It's really important that you say, yes, we recommend this club for purchase based on the information provided by Off the Pitch, but we also know that there is a limitation to this financial data, and therefore these are other things that are worth considering that perhaps aren't included within financial documentation and financial statements. So potential structure, introduction to the club, introduction to the report, a background to the club. Really important to think about, as we say, the assets of the organization and what you would actually be purchasing, what's included in that. Some financial analysis and discussion, which is where you're going to bring in Off the Pitch, and an overview of the usefulness of financial information. And finally, a kind of summary and conclusion. Okay. This is what you're going to get graded on. So 20% for that kind of clarity of club background and context, 40%, so where the bulk of the kind of highest graded section of the report is going to be on the financial data itself and the metrics you've used and the arguments that you've made. Then that critique of the published financial statements using the academic literature from week 7, and then structure and referencing. Some advice for assignment 2. So think about all of the questions. So don't neglect any of those 3 critical parts of the report. That's something that I found in the past students have perhaps not done. We're not asking you to value the club per se, although thinking back to some of the content we have covered in class, think about, you might be interested in providing some idea of what it might be valued at and how that valuation has come about. Think about the metrics you're going to use. Don't just choose any random metrics which show the club being highest, but show us that you know what that metric means, and what the kind of broader understanding there is. You got to demonstrate that you understand the data as well, and including some graphs and reports within the report. Sorry, some graphs and charts within the report that kind of highlight your points. And then also put a bit of thought into the clubs you want to compare it with. We haven't mentioned this point, but actually, if you're going to compare it with 4 or 5 other clubs, making sure that it makes sense to compare 4 or 5 other clubs. Trying to compare apples with pears, it isn't going to make sense. So it's got to be a bit of rationale to why you're choosing the clubs you're choosing. Okay. And as I say, don't forget to critique the usefulness of financial accounts. Okay, that's all I wanted to share as a kind of a recap and a reminder of the things that we're looking for in the report. I hope that's helpful. One key takeaway, as I say, is that it's week 7 of the readings, not week 6. I hope that's helpful, and I look forward to reading your reports.